So let's start the video now. There we go. It's me, your boy, Chro. So what is this blog post about, and kind of like where am I going with it? Because it is a lot to take in, and not all the changes I'm asking for are actually pertaining to this. There's just a couple of them I like, the hog changes, and I think a couple other changes. I was like, I would like to see this. That'd be cool. But the main idea behind this post is that Overwatch players currently, we cannot judge if there is power creep or if there's a problem with burst damage overall or damage overall or healing or anything, because we are so focused 6v6 fighting head on head, because mobility is weak when compared to Deathball. It's not that it's not possible, it's just that at a high level, it's incredibly risky and usually suicidal to flank. Now, sometimes you can just go off to the side a little bit and get an angle, but when it comes to actual flanking, get behind, get to the side, that is significantly weaker. I'm not even talking about long flanks, I'm just talking about a flank that takes 4 or 5 seconds. Because this is why GOATS was so good, was that if I ever noticed that you didn't have all 6 heroes, I just took my 6 heroes and I crushed your 5 immediately. Because you had one guy that was flanking, and even if I let him get to where he needed to be, the flank does not give enough of an advantage to the player that it's worth the time or the risk or the effort or anything about it. You could have one guy on the flank and 5 people fighting, and then the 6 people all happening at the same time, and I think the 6 just running at the 5, even with the one on the flank, is going to win every time. Not every time. I'm sure the one guy could get, some lucky picks, maybe. But there's also the chance that they just take an off tank, kill the guy that's flanking, and then kind of just kill the other 5. Is Deathball considered the OG GOATS meta? Deathball's kind of being meta for a while. Mobility, essentially dive is kind of what I'm getting at, but at the same time, I just want the game to provide something more than just dive or Deathball. I think like 5-1 splits, 4-2 splits, a little bit more risky, but it'd be interesting to have. The more fighting we can get off of the main point, the better. Up to a certain point. So that's the general gist of it. And so we'll just go over this, but I just wanted to hit the core idea that I'm going for. And basically my suggestion on how to deal with this. Like a lot of heroes in the game have mobility. It's just that they're punished so hard if they're not behind a shield and they use it. And I just want to not remove it so you can't punish them, just make it so you have to be a little bit better to punish them and give them a little more breathing room overall. Because once we allow players to not just sit behind a shield, I think we'll see the game in a different light. Because right now we're so concerned about burst damage and how heavy damage is, because we just take 2 teams and we just sandwich them together with shields, and we're just like, well, one of you guys are going to die. And as soon as someone stops that, they lose. Because there's no other viable ways of playing. So let's just go over this. We'll go over it. It's going to take probably an hour, maybe more, depending how much ranting I get done and how many tangents I go on, which I go on a lot. So first of all, I just want to say props to Blizzard. I do say this. I want to open this up by giving credit to Blizzard. When Jeff mentioned balance a while back, he said he thought Overwatch was in a good spot and everyone thought he was crazy, but it's the truth. There's a single fact that constantly reminds me of this. With enough skill, you can get a top 500 with any hero, at times top 100. Some heroes are easier to climb with, and it's not a shot at low skill floors, it's a shot at meta heroes. So like, when Genji was top 500, I think 70% of top 500 was Genji. That's what I'm talking about. Some heroes are easier to climb with. There's the fact that it's still possible. The way that I think of it is that after a 7-year development cycle, the only issue is that heroes numbers off by 10%. That's pretty damn good. And that's what a lot of people don't really see, is they don't see the whole work up to the point that we're in Overwatch right now. And if you work for something for 7 years, 8 years, and then everyone could play it fine, and at the top 1%, you'd still run most heroes, The community needs to face it. They hit their scope, and now it's about fine-tuning. So, like, overall, that's funny. How I'm gonna... In my head, how I wanted to follow that up is how I follow it up. Overall, we complain too much in this community. Some of it's constructive, but that's rare. In either case, it doesn't matter how we get feedback. It does, but understand that while we can do the constructive criticism, be like, this is this, and this make this, and this is how it should be done, and stuff like that, there's also tremendous feedback, and people are just like, I don't know what's wrong. I hate the fact that whenever I fight a Brigade with what hero, it just feels like shit. And they're like, okay, so it's their job as developers to take this in, just like how the game makes us feel, whether the criticism is constructive or not. Like, because if like there's pros and like 90% of the pros are like, I hate Brig, I hate Orisa, I hate that I have to play this fucking hero, I don't like it. If I wasn't getting paid for it, I wouldn't be playing this fucking game. That speaks volumes. They try to understand the source of these feelings and attempt to address them. They have some hits and misses, but I really wanted to give respect where it's due before talking about design. So before I'm like, oh, Overwatch is total shit, I just want to be like, no, it's in a really good spot. We just kind of gotta talk about it a little bit. I think there's some fine points that need to be talked about. So I have a post on change if they did everything right. A couple reasons. The first answer to Overwatch's design and healing Cold War. For those that don't understand what I mean, Cold War is just like where both people just escalate it, and it's just like, you put down your gun. And I'm like, I'm not putting down my gun. You put down your gun. And no one puts down a gun, and then everyone has a bunch of guns. It's more complex than reducing healing and damage by X amount. I specifically state this because Jeff Goodman said one of the internal tests they tried was lowering damage and healing by a set amount, and it didn't feel good. And my answer to that is, well, DPS and supports play differently, and also, more importantly, the player feedback, effectiveness, enjoyment, and skill from different metrics. Therefore, the approach has to be different for each role. Simply saying how good a DPS hero is doing is not how you judge how good a support is doing. They just work differently. Also, and I'm going to be bringing this up more, and this is kind of like what I tweeted about the core crux of Overwatch. If you think about it, how many heroes deal damage on a team? All 6. How many heroes heal? 2. You're inherently going to have to balance these classes different, these roles different. There's no way to say, oh, no, we're going to tone down healing, so it's just equal to damage. Well, you can't, because there's six heroes doing damage and 2 only doing healing. The healing will always lose. And then healing will never feel satisfactory. Secondly, flanking is nowhere near as useful as teamfight. This promotes deathball and focus fire. With no other options, the team has to double down and run a deathball themselves. This is where Overwatch turns into a revolutionary war with shields. Both teams line up and take shots until someone dies. There's very little movement or flanking involved. Even rarer are fights where the teams are completely separated. So this is where I was talking like, maybe 3 people are fighting on one flank, 3 people are fighting on like the main path. That never happens in Overwatch. To properly address the greater issue of damage creep. Also, one thing about this, people say, well, Chro, that's because it's single objective based. And as long as there's a single objective, everyone's going to take all their pieces and put them right on the one objective. And I say, no, that is not the case. It's only that case because only the point has value. And when I talk about flanking and doing these design changes, I'm saying, let's give the flank more value. As soon as the flank is more valuable than the point, all of a sudden flanking becomes just more predominant, right? If I can take the high ground and I got 2 health packs behind me and I can get a bonus from that, and you're stuck on the low ground with literally no way to get to me and you're stuck just sitting there, sweet. I want to take the position and then you lose the point, right? So just because there's a single point doesn't mean we have to have a single type of head-on fight. That's a flaw in game design and not with just the point. If we allow players to be more mobile and reduce reliable burst damage, we get a clearer look at damage across the board, and if we decide time to kill is too low. In a perfect world, most of the fighting would happen as a team, but small skirmishes to determine positioning would happen on the flank. This would allow for a mixture of individual skill and teamwork. I think the community is biased against damage because of how heavily the game is required to have focus fire against 2 shields. Essentially, this is why Double Shield is predominant, besides their mid-range damage, is if I have 2 shields up and you don't, there's a good chance that my team's just going to kill you because you kind of can't really deal with it. We're seeing a lot of dive, at least Winston Zarya dive, right now because basically you just send in a Winston with a bubble, he survives some disable, Ana heals him up, the next time he dives, Ana has ultimate, and Winston starts cleaving people and killing people. So, essentially he can just cleave through everything once he has, fucking 90 damage a second. But yeah, essentially you just get stuck in this Cold War where you're stuck dealing burst damage against each other, and since both compositions are so low mobility, it's all like you're stuck. You have to double down with the damage. You cannot move. You can't do anything else. But dive kind of shakes us up, and it's good. We're finally weakening double shield until the point where some other things are viable. And if anyone watched the Pacific contenders, Winston Zarya is pretty predominant now. A couple minor points of why changes are needed that won't be directly targeted here. The first is that Overwatch's core design of counter-picking is no longer a balancing point. Yet the original heroes were designed with that concept in mind. Most new heroes don't have a direct counter or were designed to have less of a weakness than the original cast. Just look at the new heroes and they have very few weaknesses, and if they are weak in one area, they're usually massively overcompensated for it in other areas. This is why a lot of people are saying new heroes are overkitted because they can kind of do everything. As for the old heroes, like this is why Torb, Sim, Junkrat, Bastion, Reaper, and other major hero changes that we've experienced have happened. Heroes can't be specialists anymore. A specialist's answers are too easy, and games with them either feel like they're overpowered or instantly countered. And by this I mean, if I picked Sim or Junkrat back in the day, there were specific answers against them, and if you ran those answers, you lost. The Junkrat lost. So it came down to, alright, either Junkrat's so overpowered in his design and on specific maps that you have to play him and he cannot be beaten, or you just simply run another answer and you immediately kill him right away. Like you run his counter and he's gone. So specialists, like, while it is cool, but understand that as a specialist you have to pick essentially like a side, like design side. So you just kind of counter it with something that's on the other side of that, and he doesn't get any value. You think a major shift of design would cause most, if not all, heroes to be changed, but we haven't seen that. When they moved to 2-2-2, all they changed was like Brig? Og? I forget. There weren't a lot of changes, in my opinion, that when you change completely how the game's designed, you'd just be like, alright, no, we should touch every hero, and they did. The second minor reason I want to ask through a question. I'd like to ask Jeff or Geoff in regards this question. In regards to balance, do you believe a game must constantly change because of player growth? How can a character be balanced if skill can take them out of scope for what they're designed for? As developers, we should be able to see the abuse of something when done skillfully. If we don't, then the idea of a counter-based game goes out the window, because certain heroes can grow past their counters. This is great if it happens for every hero, but if it doesn't, then those without a weakness due to skill will always be played, and a dominant meta will form. So, let's just do this one. My reason for asking this is Jeff made another point, and it was that he didn't believe a game should be changed for the sake of change. I agree with this to an extent, but a game will have to change because of player growth. With the lack of action from Blizzard with balance has me guessing, how does he define need a change? The problem with high-level design is that sometimes you get your head stuck in the clouds. If A is a problem, don't change C to deal with B, then that will deal with A. Sometimes nerfing A directly is the answer. Something Blizzard has been reluctant to do in Overwatch. It actually took till this year in Overwatch design for them to nerf actual problems. A follow-up question is, do you believe it's possible for a developer to probably design a game when they're afraid of their audience? Alright, so this part, we talked it a lot about in our stream. Essentially, you have to account for player skill because it will become a problem eventually. But if only certain heroes are allowed to grow past their current skill level, then those heroes that do not, that essentially evolve past their weaknesses will just be played. Widow is a very good example of this. If Widow is played, and let's say she was played perfectly, there's not much you could do. She doesn't have any direct counters. There's no really good ways to deal with her. Outside of a better Widow, but we talk about that later. Like, that's cool. That's great that, like, a Widow can deal with short-range issues with enough skill. I think that's great. The problem is if every hero cannot overcompensate for the weakness, but only a couple can, then you'll just see those heroes played. And that's what really we saw with Goats, was like, man, these characters are bad at long range, all these tanks and supports. Well, let's just use basically skill and mechanics to shield all the way to get to them, and we just make it a brawl. Like, we deal with their weaknesses, and there's, you know, other heroes can't deal with that because they have weaknesses of their own. And just their lack of change overall in the game. Once you start seeing Widow crit rates get up to 30-35%, maybe we got to start looking at Widow, because, you know, she's out of scope. She has grown past what we, you know, designed her for. I think another example of that, I guess you could say, was Junkrat, when he was just too accurate with a 0.3 size shot, I believe it was. I'm sure during the original, you know, games of Overwatch, like, oh yeah, Junkrat's really hard to hit, or he's hard to low accuracy with. So what happened is players got good enough where their accuracy grew to a point where Junkrat became a problem. We're like, all right, we kind of figured Junkrat would have like a 25% accuracy. People are getting 40%, and he's just ridiculous. So we have to do something to bring it down. To bring it back within scope, with what he was designed for. To make one point clear, these ideas do not address power creep. This is strictly dealing with reliable burst damage to give us more mobility overall. Once the game is more even in terms of mobility, we can get a clear view on the overall damage of Overwatch. Power creep and ultimates are another issues, but would have to be dealt with after these changes if we still see an issue. I'll attempt to follow a flow to keep this clear and concise. It's funny for me to say. I'll give my suggestion and then follow it up with what the problem is and how my suggestion will attempt to address it. I want to make all parts of my process visible, and this is really important. I want to make all parts of my process visible because I believe there's personal skill with each part. You know, design is a skill. Like, you can be good and bad at different parts. Sometimes you'll identify the problem. Sometimes you'll identify the problem well, but the suggestion is lacking. This is an effort to keep conversation flowing and help identify issues as a community. A suggestion without perspective doesn't contribute to greater conversation. Basically, if I'm just like, blah, 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 this hero sucks, and I don't really tell you, like, in what method, like, they suck in and stuff like that, and everyone's like, no, the hero's pretty good. But overall, I just want to keep, like, all parts of my thought process going so that people can kind of contribute to it. And they're like, bro, I think you're wrong in this part. And I'll be like, why? And you're like, well, you based it on this, and that's not right. I'm like, okay, cool. We can have a discussion about that. The overarching theme to my suggestions are as follows: to reduce reliable burst damage, which will enable movement, and reduce the dependency on shields. To allow all roles to feel like they can make plays, to place a greater emphasis on position and execution instead of abilities, and to allow a more diverse hero pool. Overall, DPS heroes will have less reliable burst damage, while supports will get a larger downtime windows to take advantage of. And then in bold, this is because, while all heroes can deal damage, only some can heal. This creates a difference of 6 heroes dealing damage versus 2 heroes healing. Healing must work in bursts or will never overcome this disparity. So this is just kind of everything we've talked about. I just kind of reiterated it. I'm like, look, just remember, this is kind of what everything's focused on. Again, I'm not saying this is going to get rid of burst damage as a whole. This is essentially reducing reliable burst damage so movement is more available. So what do I say? First of all, ultimate charge increased by 15%. I did this because the post was so long that I just wanted people to click and see it and open and post it. Ultimates happen a bit too frequently. It's common for supports to get their ultimate within the first minute of play. This happens a lot. The problem gets worse when controlling ults that help a team build up more ultimates, which starts a dangerous snowballing effect. Before the last ult charge, Overwatch League coaches, they just called it getting cycled. Essentially, ults built so fast that if you hit a shatter or a grab or anything, the rest of the team could build up their ultimates based on this, and you just constantly get in this loop of just shatter and grab and all these other ultimates. Part of me thinks ultimates should go on overall timers instead, but being based on charge, instead of being based on charge. But I understand it's an immense mechanic to give player feedback, how well they're performing, but the concept of ultimates is ultimately snowballing, right? How do you get ultimates faster? Do better. Alright, I'm already killing their team. What do I get for that? Well, you get an ultimate to kill their team even harder. I don't like that design, but overall, Overwatch is a complex game to teach people if what they're doing is right or wrong. And like the alt charge thing is a really good indication, especially for new players, to see if you're doing your job kind of right. I understand that this game is meant for players and people who have not played FPSs before, and they need this type of feedback. Like this as a game mechanic is soughtly, like it is very, very needed. It's highly sought after, I should have said. But still, it's happening too much. And now here's the big change. Headshot multiplier from 2 to 1.5. All 200 hit point DPS heroes are to 100 hit point, 100 shields. Shield regen starts after 5 seconds, up from 2. And shield regeneration rate from 30 a second to 25 a second. This is basically where I address most of my concerns. Overall, body shot damage in Overwatch feels good. We just need to address the certain burst damage of headshots. Really, like, if you're one-on-oneing a DPS hero, and, like, they don't get headshots and they just shoot you with body shots, let's say, Ashe takes 3 shots, and that feels fine. McCree takes 3 shots. It's pretty quick. It's a second and a half. Still feels okay. Like, Junkrat takes 2 shots. Pharah takes 2 shots. All of these, like, the slow projectiles, like, it's kind of, alright, he give me 2 of them, fine, he can take that kill. With hit scan, it's like, alright, 3 or 4 shots, or it takes, like, a second and a half, 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds with some hit scan. This all feels kind of reasonable. But when someone can headshot and immediately follow up with another shot, all of a sudden that time to kill drops to 1 second, or instant, in Widow's case. I have to stress that this does not remove burst damage, but only limits it. Currently, players are forced to play behind shields too much, and when out of cover for a second, there's a risk of instant unavoidable death. This limits playstyles and makes the game feel constricted. It inherently makes non-deathball compositions weaker. The primary way for a weaker force to deal with a stronger force is either choke points or to outmaneuver. With movement being so limited in Overwatch because of burst damage, teams are often unable to reposition themselves without suffering game-losing damage. When responding properly, low mobility compositions are still smashed once they lose a couple teammates, as they have no way to deal with a stronger force. Essentially, remember when I said, if we take what Overwatch is right now, you take 2 strong forces and just smush them. Well, if I lost 2 heroes here, I don't have mobility to deal with the stronger force. They just take 6 and they kill my 4. There's nothing they can do about it. Essentially, if you're fighting someone in their strength, and that strength is also your strength, then whoever starts like getting weaker first immediately loses. Just right away, bam, it's all over. Overall, players should feel more freedom when moving around the map, while rewarding players who can be more consistent with headshots. So at 1.5, McCree would do 105 damage. So he would still 2-tap you if he did double headshots. And at that point, hey, you double headshotted me, take the W. Alright? But if you headshotted me and then body shotted me, I don't like that as a victory. I should get like another half a second to a second. And McCree, when I say McCree, I just mean 70 damage. 70 damage is a very big breakpoint in Overwatch. Basically, headshot, body shot kills, and I want to make it, 2 headshots kill, or headshot, body, or the current body shot count, which is like 3 or 4. With the change to 100 HP and 100 shields, a single headshot will still deal HP damage, while a double will still kill. So I kind of just mentioned that, but like, McCree would do 105 damage, so you would take 5 permanent damage, right? You take 100 shield damage and 5 health damage. So you would actually take some permanent damage if you weren't healed. If any damage is done, it will force the target to back off for 5 seconds before shields start regenerating. So instead of having it 2 seconds, which is really fast, they have to back off for 5 seconds and let it regen for essentially at 25 a second for 4 seconds. So you buy your team 9 seconds, right? That's a long time. But that's what they get for, getting shot. They got caught, you caught them. Now you get a little bit of a window to deal with their shit or the rest of their team. Or they can come out, take a little bit of a risk. That's fine. But understand they can be punished then. Which is great. The big thing is we're enabling options and some play and counterplay. The end goal of this change is to force an extra body shot after a headshot on 200 hit point heroes, or require 2 headshots to kill, rewarding skill and consistency. So when you start talking about reducing headshot damage, everyone's like, I guess you don't care about skill. Because skill means I should win if I hit your head. I'm like, no. Skill is consistency. Just because you shot my head once doesn't mean shit. You should be forced to be consistently very good to kill me that quick. So it actually favors skill more by lowering headshot damage. Because consistency is more important to skill than anything else. So you're forcing players to be consistent. And if they say, no, that's not the case, I'll be like, well, what's more skillful? A Widow with 50% headshot, rate, or 10%? And they go, well, the Widow with 50% rate. Like, oh yeah, they're more consistent. These changes also address the dependency between DPS and support. A while ago, Blizzard stated that new changes were meant to highlight individual performance, and they were not used to it because the game was originally designed around teamwork. I should find the post about that, but it was so heavy around teamwork that they're just like, this is weird. I agree with this change in direction, but a change in philosophy means nothing until a core mechanic is changed to support it. Blizzard has yet to do this. While Blizzard has stated they want to highlight individual performance, what have they done to highlight it? Nothing. Not a goddamn thing. They may have, given a couple heroes more ability to kill people, but they haven't been like, alright, this mechanic, blah, that affects every hero is now changed, so to make, individual heroes feel stronger. Ideally, DPS heroes will still need some support, but not to the point that they're dependent on it. By allowing more heroes to heal slowly, we allow supports to move freely by not requiring constant line of sight. To this effect, Blizzard was right to call the role support and not healer, right? Supports are supports. They're not heal bots, they don't just sit there and fucking heal you. They do other things besides healing, and that's support. We also address supports being slightly more offensive overall. By giving supports more time and space, they're allowed to use more of their kit offensively. Reducing the dependency between roles is a good start. So this is really important. If we want supports to feel fun in an FPS, they usually have to deal more damage. But if they deal more damage, they're not healing. Well, the game requires healing, so they just die, right? The team loses, so they gotta heal. Well, what if we just broke the dependency on DPS and support a little bit? We allow supports, DPS to move some. They can heal on their own, so they don't need line of sight, they don't need constant support from supports. This kind of opens up cycles for supports to be a little more offensive, and I think that is fun. Again, we're just giving supports more options, and we're giving DPS more options. Which is great, that's what we want. We don't want to be like, you play support, you sit there, you keep line of sight on your tanks and your DPS, and you break line of sight on the enemy, and that is all you do, don't do anything else. I think the dependency between supports and DPS needs to be broken up a bit to make the game funner for all parties involved. The immediate worry with headshot damage is that tanks become too strong. But the shield change affects Ryan and Sigma and deals with double shield. It punishes slower tank pushes in a way that will force the team to stay back a couple extra seconds when moving between positions. The idea is to give teams the option that if they want a full HP shield or to press forward right away with reduced shield. So essentially think about it. Hanamura point 1. Reinhardt and the team pushes through the choke point and then they take a flank. Well, right now, it takes 2 seconds and they start regenerating like crazy. And by the time they come out of that flank, it's almost at a full hit point shield again, and they're just pushing again. Well, they can still do that, but now with a 5-second delay, that's 3 seconds of healing it's not getting. So they either have to wait longer, or they push with less shield, and they risk taking more damage. Fucking great. Right? That's the problem. Also, when you break a shield, it comes back almost right away. Well, now it breaks for 5 seconds, and then they start regenning. And then it's like, oh my god, we can shoot shields, and it matters? They don't just get it back right away? It's like, yes, they don't. So I think we deal with Sigma and we deal with Rein, and we don't deal with Orisa yet, but dealing with Sigma and Rein, you deal with a majority of double shield. Essentially, you punish people keeping their shield out for too long or getting their shield broken. If they wait, the defending team can probably reposition themselves. So if they do wait to regen their shield, guess what? My whole team can reposition, and we take a much more even fight instead of being rushed to adapting to whatever you did. And people are like, well, if a team does, they rotate properly, they should be given an advantage. I'm like, yes, they should. So the team can't the defending team can't reposition, but you don't get your fucking shields back. You quickly rotated, so you gotta sacrifice them. Overall, it will make shields feel slightly more rewarding to damage. Shields without regen will be changed in the notes below. A tank's effectiveness overall is directly tied to their supports, which is what we're targeting instead of tank balance. Specific tank hero changes are below. So while tanks may seem scary with reduced headshot damage, we're targeting supports that will target tank. Also, the shield change should deal with most. It deals with Rein Sigma. And right now there's 4 tanks with headshot capabilities and 4 without. So it's just a give and take, and I'd rather target supports to deal with tanks than just make tanks feel like shit. Lastly, this is to help even the playing field between multiple design types. Sustained damage would now be slightly more comparable to burst damage, as well as projectile heroes are more closer to being on par with hit scan. Currently, projectiles and sustained type designs are a little bit below hit scan and burst. Instead of buffing them, we can slowly make them as impactful by lowering headshot damage. I mean, it is what it is. Hit scan is king, burst damage is king. No one really cares about projectile damage right now, and Pharah is never ran. Junkrat is ran on a couple maps, and it's only ran, if people want to talk about this, Junkrat is only ran with Symmetra right now, and you run both of them together because Junkrat only has a second or 2 seconds of extra burst damage against shields. He actually isn't that much better against shields than other classes. He gives you 2 seconds of advantage, which is nothing. But when paired with the Sim, she also gives you 2 seconds advantage. So by having 2 shield specialists or breaking specialists, you actually get like a 5-second window that you can take advantage of. If you ran one or the other, you don't get that much damage against shields, and really, you just don't see their effectiveness. And then sustain damage heroes like Soldier. I'm trying to think of another really good example. They're just not played at all. They're just not. Some may note a contradiction between lowering burst damage and trying to give heroes the ability to make plays. The idea is to allow heroes to make plays, but they need to have some consistency in the skill to do it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to highlight individual skill. Let's lower headshot damage so DPS can't make plays. And they're like, no, we can't make plays. What are we going to do? You can still make plays. You just got to be better. Or you have to wait for advantages and then take advantage of those advantages. You're not just given the ability to do whatever the fuck you want and then win. So that's for that. Fall off minimum damage down to 20% for all heroes where fall off is applicable. Snipers rebanded as scouts. Transition from to suppressive fire and utility. And the utility is information gathering. So there are 2 issues I have with fall off damage. Currently, fall off damage has 2 different minimums, 30% and 50%. Without prior knowledge, this is not possible to know through the in-game mechanics alone. Secondly, hit scan heroes apply too much pressure to heroes and open at long ranges. Any concerns about long range damage or consistency should be dealt with at the hero level with a fall off range or weapon balance. The same fall off issues exist for splash damage. Currently, splash damage can vary from 20 to 50% fall off depending on the ability. Making it 20% across the board will help players gauge damage distance better in little load. So with these 2, we're just looking to lower damage and make things more consistent overall. And yeah, so like, Ashe, Widow, Soldier, Bastion, McCree, Baptiste have 50% damage fall off, and then all of their hit scans have 30%. Or 20%. I think this is a typo. That's stupid. We should just make them even. And if you want Soldier to deal more damage at long range, give them a longer fall off. Stop fucking with fall off damage as a whole, and just apply it to the weapon like we normally. And then the change to snipers to address the concern with snipers losing the ability to one-shot. Currently, snipers are one of the primary reasons you need shields. It was noted by Blizzard in this patch. And if we look at this patch, developer comment, Widowmaker has become stronger over time following changes to other heroes, such as a power reduction to barriers. This change is intended to slow down other shots, reducing her overall DPS. So Blizzard can't be like, oh man, we didn't see Widow getting strong. We didn't know that. No, they made a comment they know. Widow will partially retain her ability to one-shot, while Hanzo will not. The idea is to take some lethality away, but to increase the amount of openings they can create, favoring mobility and a new utility, information. Specific hero changes will be below. Credited environmental deaths give ultimate charge to all opponents. I believe ultimate generation should be considered a utility. So when we talk about utility, we're like speed boost, damage boost, Discord orb, stuff like that. I don't consider healing a utility. That's like a job. But I want to add 2 more utilities in there. I want to add information, and I want to add ultimate generation. I believe ultimate generation should be considered a utility. We already have it in a way with damage amplification, right? Because it increases your overall damage, which gives you more ult. The idea is to allow heroes with environmental hazard potential to provide more for their team. Since this change only affects credited deaths, any suicides will not be given to the entire team as damage. So I just want there to be more things in Overwatch. I don't want just to give it bloat. But I think heroes like Lucio and Hammond and all these other heroes, just to give them a little bit more usability, it would give Pharah a little bit more usability. And with the alt nerf, all of a sudden these heroes that generate alts for their entire team, that's really cool. It would just reward it more too. Also, here's the next one. So this is to address flank. Health packs respawn time down 50%. So small health packs are 10 seconds, goes down to 5. Large health packs are 15 seconds, down to 7. For reference, Sombra hack reduces respawn time to 2.5 seconds. So it's not as fast as Sombra, but it's faster. Both health packs essentially heal for 25 less, but they give 25 temporary HP for 4 seconds. Move health packs off the main route and more onto the flanks. A big issue I've had with Overwatch is it doesn't support flanking in the sense that it's not anywhere near on par with being with your team. We talked about this before. The times that it does support flanking is with instant kills, which is what we're removing. You'll notice Junkrat will try to get a combo off and then, on a flank and then leaves. Or McCree or Widow, they try to appear for a second, get a pick immediately, or just run away. In most cases, if you know the enemy is flanking, you simply crush their 5 heroes with your 6. This is GOATs. Oh, you got a hero flanking? I'm just going to take the battle and win with 6 heroes. If you ever flank, I'm just going to keep you honest by keep on pressure on you. If I ever count 5 heroes, we go forward, we kill you. Because your other hero is flanking, and that's a waste of time. The other option is to send an off-tank to easily kill them. We've all seen this before. Someone flanks, you send a D.Va, a Sigma, someone else to deal with it. And it's not like their main force is hurting because you still have 5v5 then, and then you have a mismatch between this DPS hero, or whatever hero, it's DPS hero mostly flanking, and then a tank that can just beat him on the flank. This change assists flanking by allowing flankers to stand up against off-tanks if they follow them too deeply into the flank. So let's say Nimbani third point. Someone followed you up that last, up the stairs, and you're camping that back room with the health pack. If they follow you that far, you can keep on getting the health pack, and they really can't take you out. The one thing about tanks is they do low amounts of consistent damage. Winston's Tesla Cannon is the perfect example. Constantly does 60 damage. Well, if you can camp this health pack, you're going to kill him before he kills you with the health pack. So he has to push you back, and you're like, all right, I'll get away. I won't be a direct threat, but I'm going to stay here, and if you ever back off, I'm going to put pressure on again. So what it does is, by creating, so essentially, in most cases, the fight would end in a draw, and force a team to send more heroes to deal with the flanking hero. By creating a mismatch of hero amounts, we now have a reason to flank other than killing, and one hero can force 2 heroes out of the death ball. So now, instead of just Winston coming up to get me, they have to bring a Winston and a support, or a Winston and a DPS, or support and a DPS. They have to bring 2 heroes to deal with the 1 DPS flanking. Now, the 5 people on the main route can attack their 4. Like, we're creating a disturbance. Instead of having an even 1-to-1 on the flank, we now require a 2-to-1 or something like that. The reason for the extra temporary HP is added for the health pack is to allow heroes to leverage the extra time needed in the open with our headshot changes. So with headshot changes and burst damage removed, or reliable burst damage removed, you need to you have to sit on the flank for an extra half a second to a second, which would get you killed at 200 hits. But at 220, you start breaking these thresholds of damage breaks. So now McCree requires an extra shot. A lot of 70 damage heroes require an extra shot. Ash would require 2 headshots, stuff like that. 25 HP is all that is needed to change damage thresholds of most hero, but Discord or damage amplification will remove that advantage. Notice how we make Zen and Mercy want to be more played, and we encourage them by tactics, not buffs. We're not giving Zen more damage or giving Mercy more damage. We're just saying, let's create this environment where if you had 20% more damage, it would make a really big difference. So now Mercy and Zen are a little bit more useful in these situations. And we didn't buff them, we just changed the tactics that happen in the game. What we'd want to avoid is making the flank too powerful. By allowing this temp HP to exist for 4 seconds, only 1 hero on a team can get it per pack. Also, we're minimizing the potential of a flanker instantly killing support with the previous damage changes. It promotes the flanker to create openings for others to take advantage or vice versa. Conceptually, a hero should get an attempt to get value on the flank, they shouldn't be guaranteed it. Positioning alone should not outright win you the game, execution is still needed. The reason why I kind of like double back and say the same thing, or say the opposite, I don't want to have a game where if you get the positioning, you win. You're like, I got the high ground, Anakin, I've won. I don't got to do shit now. I apparently climbed up this thing first, and I win. We don't want that. We don't want positioning to guarantee you a win. At the same time, we don't want to make flanking irrelevant, like it is kind of now. So we're like, we find this middle ground where if you flank, you have to execute well. You have to have skill to do it. But it's not as risky as it is now. Right now, I'd say it's a death sentence against anyone's skill to flank. So we give people, we make the flank a little less risky, but we make it so they really can't capitalize it by themselves. So essentially, if a flanker flanks, he creates damage that the main team has then to take advantage of. Or he waits a little bit, the main team engages, and they create an opening for him to take advantage. That would be like the ideal scenario. Momentum is always additive. This changes to create consistency across the board and remove momentum from being overwritten. Currently, there are abilities that remove any source of momentum and replace it, such as Seismic Slam, Pile Driver, and Halt. A hero's viability should not be dependent on removing the ability's opponent's ability to move. Note that this does not give heroes full control in the air when under these abilities, only the ability to change how they're affected by it initially. If Hammond Pile Driver's here, and you're standing here, you just go up. But what I'm proposing is if you're going like this and he pile drives, instead of you just stopping and having to go up, you would essentially go, let's go over here. If he pile drives and you're moving, you would just affect the initial trajectory of your momentum. So if you're running this way, or that's a bad way, if you're running this way, you just keep on going down. So instead of just completely overriding whatever you're doing, it just gets added to it. So if you're moving backwards, you'll stay moving backwards, stuff like that. And I just don't like it. And with Doomfist, it's funny when people talk about Doom. Like, well, if Doom doesn't completely stun you and control you, you have no way to fight back. And if you have a way to fight back, Doom just dies. My comment to that would be like, if a hero is dependent on you losing control, fuck that hero. That's not good design. Tab screen no longer shows enemy heroes. Currently, the stats screen gives away information too easily. Hero choices on the stat screen should update when the player takes damage from the enemy team. This allows a little more deception, which is healthy for the game. Truth be told, you need to be able to be sneaky. If there's an option to be sneaky, you still need to do that. You notice it in StarCraft 2 and in StarCraft Brood War, they call it cheese. Essentially, you do an incredibly risky strat that's based on them not knowing, and you kind of just have to do it every now and then, just because to throw them off kilter. So if we introduce some deception, then at least it's a little funner. You can do a little bit more cool stuff. Overtime only increases spawn time for the attacking team. Overtime is needed to keep players playing, to keep the game exciting, and to keep morale high. It allows anyone to make a comeback, and while it's a bit of manufactured hype, it does help the game overall. The problem I have with overtime is that it means the defenders did their job properly, yet they're punished. Changing the spawn time only for offense means the defense can properly set up the standard defense location instead of being pressured to fight when it's not advantageous. Overtime should have higher stakes, but it shouldn't feel like a different game. Jeff mentioned in a post, and he's like, I don't like it when people just complain there's a problem. He's like, I want them to talk about it like a topic. So, he's like, well, proper question would be like, is time to kill too high? Or low, however you want to call it. So, if I wanted to word this like Jeff wanted it, I would say, well, why does overtime feel like a different game? And it usually feels like a different game because with a longer respawn time, the defenders can't set up on their normal defense positions, and the game feels rushed and just different. So, how I would deal with that is defenders get the same spawn as they usually do. Is my... Hello? How is this feeling? How does this sound now? Why is my voice deeper? My voice is deeper. Can you confirm? Hello, hello, hello. Is it? She's having a great time, so yeah, it must be.
Oh, you are so manly.
Hey, baby. Let me disconnect and reconnect my... Fixed it. Anything, people? Hello? Can anyone tell me if this is normal again? Sounds good to you? Fixed? Can you confirm?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. Where was I? Oh yeah, so how I would question this to Jeff, I'd be like, look, Jeff, Overwatch makes the game feel completely different. These are the reasons why. This is what I would do to address it. Easy peasy. Assault game mode, no changes. I just kind of talk about this because it's a big topic in the community right now. I've thought about this game mode a good amount. I don't think there's any easy way to deal with this without making map changes. My only question about this is what's the purpose of the assault? What dynamic is it looking to leverage? Yes, it's 2 CP. I have two main thoughts about it. Firstly, it's meant to be a massive uphill battle for offense. It's an attempt to create a brawl where the offense is looking to get a pick and leverage the spawn advantage. The offense can make unfavorable trades and still come out ahead in the long run. Ideally, you'd have a constant fight on the point with the offense winning in the end. This is where the second point gets messy. The defense has the spawn advantage and can keep stalling until they get picks. I think the game mode should flip its design on the second point, give the attackers a good place to stage their attack from, similar to the top balcony in Hanamura Point 2 when attacking. If you give the attackers a good place to attack from, they can freely pressure the point and take the ground. Now it's the defense who are trying to push out through a choke to defend the point once they lose their initial position. This would change the focus on the point to retake. This would mean map changes, but it would be that map pages would be required. I don't think it's an issue to have an attack-favored map in the map pool. It's actually beneficial to have this type of diversity. Overall, 2 CP has more issues than snowballing. So the idea is you'd have to change the spawn of every assault map, But essentially, you make the second point take longer to capture, and you make it easier to get to for the offense. But then they set up their defense, and it becomes a retake for the defense. And so it's kind of like a switch mode, right? Instead of, it's more of like, all right, the attackers are looking to attack point 1, but they're looking to defend point 2. But first they got to take it. So it's more of a take and hold type deal. And I thought like focusing on the retake would be interesting. Because I don't think there's any way about it besides map changes. Like, I think the map has to change. I don't think no matter what you do to the mode, I think it's always going to suck. Even with their proposed mode where like the game ends and then starts again, it just kind of, I think it's always going to feel like shit. I think that's all there is to it. Nothing really to say about that. I was just like, I don't think it's possible. Hero changes. So I want to focus more on what I believe is wrong rather than what I propose. There are multiple ideas to deal with the problem. These are just the ones I thought I could address. As such, I'll hide the suggestion so viewers will see the reasons first. Some of the changes are not addressing the mobility-related concerns we discussed here, but I included them anyways, as some heroes are generally in a bad spot. So, just as a flow change, notice how I say the change and then I say why. Down here, I'm just going to be like, I say why, and then you have to click the button to actually see what I change. Because I want you to read the description and then be like, okay, well, I don't think what you said addresses that properly, but I agree with how you said, this is the hero's issue. Supports, this is the only role I'll talk about. But each hero in general, supports will reduce to 50% of self-heal across the board because of the reduction of headshot damage. Their overall healing will not change, but the amount of downtime between their bursts of healing will be increased. This allows supports to still make plays while still giving the opposing team windows if they use their abilities improperly. While there are massive complaints in the community about AoE passive healing, understand that it's needed because not everyone wants to actively heal. Each role in Overwatch is meant to appeal to a different set of players. To the different sets of players. Yeah, that works. It's improper to think that players want to play a support and then pick a hero. New players will generally have a way to enjoy the game, and there should be a support that helps fill that role. The difficult part is at a higher level, there needs to be a support to deal with a problem in case the rest of the team composition lacks that specific need. I'm not suggesting counters, I'm saying that if we have concepts such as mobile burst for DPS, the support role needs to have some answers as well. So overall, self-heal for all heroes, across the board, 50%. Because they get survivability increase with the headshot change, we need to kind of smack their survivability down a little bit. So Ana, overall Ana is a little overtuned in all areas. She has a strong anti-ultimate kit, but she still packs a punch with some of the highest healing in the game. Her abilities are some of the most impactful in the game and a little too consistent to land. To create a larger window of opportunity and force the players to land their shots, we lower her ammo count to 10 and increase her reload time. This allowed players to still pull off huge heals, but if caught during a reload, they can be taken advantage of by attacking her or her team. Her sleep dart is one of the largest projectiles in the game while nearly guaranteeing a kill. Its duration is needed to deal with transformation ults, so I've made it a little harder to hit. Nanoboost is an amazing ultimate that I see as a bunker buster to gain position. To keep the goal, but stop it from being combined with other ultimates too often, we change it from a flat damage increase to guaranteed damage and an emphasis on shield break. Overwatch's damage is already high enough. I want to allow players to make their shots with this ultimate instead of allowing them to bludgeon through it. So the changes are Bionic Grenade, health heal down to 50%. Bionic Rifle, clip size from 14 to 10. This is what she originally had when she was first created. Reload time increased by a second. Sleep Dart projectile size from 0.4 to 0.2. Nanoboost heal from 250 to 150. The damage buff from a flat 50% to 100% against shields. Also, nano-boosted weapons act as a beam. It cannot be deflected or absorbed. So, fuck the extra damage on nano dart, nano boosts. Just make them crush shields, and then make it so you can't eat or deflect or anything with it. Just guarantee the damage if they make their shot. I want it to be used to get positioning and not just win games. Self-heal goes down. And then this is what creates the larger window for people to take advantage of. So again, we make reliable burst damage a little less, but for supports, we don't want to target, like, just lower their healing. We want to keep their healing high so they feel useful, but we make bigger windows, so they have to make their shots and plan things accordingly. I think Baptiste is in a solid position currently and only needs changes to line up with the global changes. His regen burst is bland and seems like an ability purely to allow him to self-heal, but it does give him some burst healing which he needs. A lot of complaints about Baptiste are for his immortality field, but the ability is designed to deal with an ultimate. It's on a long cooldown and has decent counterplay. My favorite aspect of it is that it makes the team follow up on an ultimate instead of just pressing a button. If you don't remember, Baptiste came around during Grav Dragon times. So Grav Dragon stopped getting kills with that. They actually had a follow-up on it. His primary fire damage seems acceptable, except that it does too much damage at mid-range. With his fall-off starting earlier, we clearly separate him from DPS heroes. His max fall-off was extended because of the global reduction of fall-off. He was one of the heroes with 50% fall-off. Overall, Baptiste stays the same. He gets a larger reload window, but allows the regen burst during it. So we reduce his clip size, increase his reload, standardize his fall-off. Same thing here. Regen burst, self-heal 50%. Right now, regenerative burst gets interrupted by reloading. With a longer reload, we'll just let it go through it. Brigade. People are waiting for this one. While the most hated hero in the game, she provides a nice brawling type support. Not only is the brawling archetype needed in the support role, but the support role needs a strong anti-harasser. I think she's in a good position overall. But would like to see some of her passive healing into active. Passive is needed for players who want to play support but not focus on. This is desperately needed to get more types of players attempting to play support. Personally, I'm in this category. I'd rather quit Overwatch than play a dedicated healer like Mercy. That being said, it's a little too strong. Along with the pack change, I want to make her entire kit feel more close range by reducing the damage of her pack by 5 meters. With a reduction of headshots, she will be more problematic for burst damage, but now have significantly less self-heal. This requires her shield dance to be more active. The damage increase on her primary is there to save one attack, 0.6 seconds, against 200 hit point heroes, which is needed to because of her drastically reduced self-heal. And the question with Swordfish, you're not touching this heal at all? No, that's the whole point of all these changes, is that none of the supports were really going to change their healing amount. We're just making their downtime much larger, because you cannot lower a support's healing amount, because 6 heroes do damage, only 2 heal. If you lower the healing amount, straight up supports won't feel great at all to play because they'll do shit all. So, but for Brig, Rocket Flail damage from 35 to 40, Inspire healing reduced from 21 to 15. Inspire self-heals for 50%. Currently, I think she gets like 12 HP a second, but this would reduce it down to 7. A repair pack charges from 3 to 4. Repair pack range down 5 meters. Rarely move speed bonus 30 to 50%. So, someone asked, I think it was RDD, he's like, did the latest patch impact this at all? And I said, no, it was actually, me and Blizzard, again, we did something and we both went 2 different ways to accomplish the same thing. What Blizzard did was go, oh, we're going to increase her self-heal, but we're lowering her max health. So now she's less reliable against burst damage, but better against sustain. And I'm like, burst damage is still too strong. Let's make her still resistant against burst damage, but let's make her self-heal just shit, so she's weak against sustain damage. And then I just wanted to kind of like, she's a brawler, like close type archetype. So I'm like, let's just make all her abilities just a little bit closer range just to make her really feel like that in all aspects. Brigade would have 50 normal HP, 50 armor, 100 shield. No, she's, that only applied to DPS heroes. So she would keep her current. 200 health, 50 armor. So, it's funny, because... What was it before? There's another change I suggested, and then Blizzard did like... Oh, it was armor. What I suggested with armor was to make it twice as effective, but give less of it to heroes. And what they did is they just lowered the amount of armor everyone, or the effectivity of armor from 5 to 3. So I was like, oh, they kind of did the same thing in a different way. This would encourage healers helping each other, I'd say. Yes. But remember, healers don't need to heal DPS as much, so it's good. Lucio, one of the best balanced heroes in the game, while his self-heal has been changed significantly, he gains an immense amount of survivability with headshot damage reduced. The only change I would make with him is to align him with the new healing standard. Whilst overall healing is reduced to deal with the issue with passive healing Overwatch, he gains his new utility with environmental deaths giving all charge to the entire team. So he lowers healing by like 20%? Wait, that's 2. 1.6 would be 10. So it's more like 15% reduced in heal, but he gains the ability to get give his team alt charge. But his self-heal gets, dropped dramatically. And then amp it up kind of follows the same pattern. And that's just to reduce AoE healing overall and give him a little more utility in a different way with ultimate generation. I'd be nerfing Lucio's heal? Yep. I think AoE healing needs to be toned down a smidge. Like I said right here, it's only 2 HP a second. With amp it up, it's nerfed 6 HP a second. But again, he gains utility by giving his team ult charge. Mercy, well-balanced hero, yet highly contested on the forums. She's a support that's focused on consistent healing and evasion. She's the only hero that can heal through shields, and when she's ulting, she's quite difficult to hit. The only change to her is to address her self-heal that will start a little later to give players more time to hit that second headshot. Yeah, so just self-heal gets delayed from 1 second to 3. Moira, I actually don't give any Moira suggestions, but I say what is wrong with her. The main issue with Moira is her inability to make plays and how Blizzard compensated her kit by overloading it with consistency. I mean consistency in 2 ways. First, her abilities are simple to hit and have wide effect. Secondly, her abilities can almost always be used and have little to no timing windows to exploit. Her one weakness that doesn't get talked about enough is that she has no long-range options. In truth, I don't have any suggestions for Moira, as the latest experimental patch directly addressed my concerns. As long as her kit gets some playmaking ability while her consistency is lowered, I think she'll move in the right direction. That just sums up how I feel about Moira. It's pretty clear cut. I don't have any suggestions, but like what they did on the PTR or on the experimental card last time, it was in the right direction. Zenyatta. No changes to Zenyatta are needed. He's at the threshold for what support should be able to do with damage because of the increased time. Shield regen has already been changed enough to match the reduced self-heal change, right? Because shields were changed from 3 to 5 seconds, so he already gets longer self-heal. DPS. To keep DPS talk short, I'll list the fall-off changes. Any heroes fall off will give 10 meters to the max distance. So this is literally just, these are the heroes at 50%, knock them all down to 20%. These are all the damages for splash damage for explosions, and we reduce almost all of them. Actually, funny story, people will be so pissed at me. Junkrat technically gets a 6-point damage buff, because his damage, it goes down to 15% instead of 20%. But I'm just consistent, like making it consistent across the board. Tracer damage per clip from 220 to 200. She gains significant survivability with headshots, but retains her ability to kill someone in 1 clip with body shots. I don't believe it's good design to have her immediately die or for her to get a kill. This is just like feast or famine. It's like, oh, I dealt with the Tracer by killing her immediately, and she had no chance to outplay me. Or she doesn't, or like, she gets her clip off, and I didn't get outplayed, she just kind of killed me. I just don't like that dynamic. I want there to be a little bit more struggle between the two before people die. I would like there to be more execution on both sides before the engagement ends. By lowering her overall damage, she has to get a little closer to secure the 1 clip and stick around for one more reload if damaging heroes at range. And here we finally deal with snipers. So, Hanzo loses the ability to one-shot with his primary, but with the reallocated damage from his primary to Storm Arrow, he is the only DPS hero to retain headshot plus body shot for 200 damage. This allows him to have some lethality against other DPS heroes while outputting slightly more shield break damage. Primarily makes him more of a tank buster like Blizzard originally intended. Lastly, his bounce added to Hanzo's Storm Arrow is to address the primary issue with snipers, which is cover. Initially, I assumed Scattershot was to help deal with snipers deal with those around corners and behind cover. The problem was while the Scattershot addressed the issue, they decided to make him shoot 6 arrows at once, resulting in massive burst damage. His mobility is increased while shooting to give him more survivability while attacking. Hanzo's Sonic Arrow is changed again to give him strong control over a corner or doorway to give his teammates partial information on how the enemy team is moving, but not enough information to give him perfect. We also introduce counterplay with his arrow being destroyable if the enemy is keen enough to hear what arrow is landing. So, primary attack, I actually add knockback to it, so if someone's charging him, it does... Same thing with Sigma, where it's just a little bit of a knockback. That's what I would add to Hanzo's arrow. Lower damage, move speed penalty, he moves a little faster while drawing the bow. Storm Arrow from 70 to 80, and they ricochet once. So technically, it adds in, he can headshot you, and then body shot you with Storm Arrow and get a kill. Which is fine, right? He lost his ability to one-shot. He retains this ability to quickly follow up. I think that's fine. Notice that he can't shoot you with a primary attack, and then follow up with this right away to get a kill. Sonic Arrow, it's destroyable. It lasts longer. Its cooldown is longer, but its radius is smaller. I don't like perfect information. It makes the game lame. I don't like it. Because there's no real counterplay to the enemy knowing exactly what you're doing. You're just kind of stuck there. So if he sees a location, if you're moving to and from it, and if you're going in and out, but that's all. He doesn't see, what you're doing past that. So he's there to identify rotations and movement, not always see what the team is doing. Why buff damage? Storm Arrow is damage to 80. Because it changes nothing from what happens how it is currently. If Hanzo hits you with 70 damage, headshot, 140, hits you with another arrow, over 200, you die. This makes Storm Arrow better against shields. But it still doesn't clean up after a primary attack hit. Again, he lost his ability to one-shot off his primary, so he has to be compensated meaningfully. Mei. Slowness no longer affects players' aiming speed. Mei's really well balanced. She has her strong maps, but overall she's useful on any map. She doesn't feel like a throw pick, nor does she feel like an overbearing as before. I still think one of the mechanics that make her annoying is that she slows down your ability to aim, which takes your ability to fight. I believe the movement slows enough of a restriction, players still need to feel like they have the ability to fight her. This allows players to feel like they had some chance at fighting her once they got within her range. Simple change, just make it feel better to fight her. Doomfist, a 0.25 delay after an ability before primary fire can be shot. So before, they added like a half a second delay to any ability, or after any ability, he couldn't do anything for half a second. I just wanted, after any ability, he can't shoot for 0.25 seconds. And that's strictly to remove the ability to do an animation breaking shot after slam. Because right now, he slams, shots, uppercuts. He does a slam, shot, animation, cancel, uppercut instantly to another shot, and kill him instantly. This adds, he now has to slam, uppercut, shot. Which just gives more counterplay. Widowmaker, charge shot ammo consumption from 6 up to 6, up from 3. Grapple hook, lower cooldown to 8 seconds. Grapple can no longer latch onto the ground, like Hammond. Ultimate move to an ability. 30-second cooldown, reveals enemy position for 0.5 seconds every 2 seconds. Lasts 6 seconds. So a lot like Bloodhound's ult from Apex, and I think there's an ability in Valorant that does this too. New ultimate, transformation ult, lasts 10 seconds. Headshot multiplier to 2.5. Fully charged shots now pierce players and shields. She has been the least balanced hero in Overwatch's history. She's the primary cause for constant shielding and the non-viability of half the cast. A dominating Widow has only one answer: a better Widow. Any other answer must be made by changing your entire team and strategy. No other hero in the game elicits this type of response. By changing her headshot damage to 1.5, you can now take a single shot from her and live. For the reduction in this lethality, she gains the ability to see through walls for a short amount of time. I believe having perfect information is a very bland and boring ability. It restricts the players too much and removes any counterplay. With imperfect information, you now have to make a guess, which can be taken advantage of. Lastly, her ultimate will be given the old headshot multiplier back with the bonus ability of going through shields and players. This gives her an extreme amount of damage potential while putting it on a timer. The purpose of Widow will be to generate opportunities from afar for her team instead of winning her team the fight with a pickup. The lower cooldown hook, she can now grapple and take shots more often and abuse subtle sightlines. Lastly, her ultimate gives her the one shot that she currently has today, but with a bit more power and only for a limited time. Players now know exactly when they're in danger of getting instant kill. I don't really have to discuss that much more. Pharah, we talked about this on stream. HP from 200 HP to 150 HP, 100 armor. Coverage at regeneration rate reduced by 20%. New ability, Reactive Armor. Pharah regens 25 armor a second for 4 seconds. Damage interrupts this ability. Cooldown, 12 seconds. I've never liked Pharah's design since the start of Overwatch. She's always felt like the most feast or famine hero that's completely dependent on the enemy to run a hit scan. This makes Pharah feel like her availability is more dependent on the enemy team than it is on themselves, which is my biggest complaint with Blizzard's balancing. Instead of nerfing a hero, they buff her counters. This takes all choice away from the player except for picking a new hero. This is why I hate counters and that entire idea. While Pharah has her dominant maps, there are usually better options to run. The fall-off changes causes a worry that she'll become too strong. To address this, we lower her ability to be pocketed by lowering fuel regeneration. In a perfect scenario, she'll have to land for 2 to 3 seconds before taking flight again. This forces her out of her ideal position and punishes a pocket healer that will feel less than useful during this window. In return, she gains some armor and the ability to regenerate it when not in combat. The armor also helps her to deal with hit-scan heroes and gives her some survivability in the duel when on the ground. So essentially, I want Pharah to have to land. I want her to have to land for 3 seconds. In return, she gets some armor to deal with hit-scan, but you can't pocket her now because she has to land. She doesn't just always hover and chill out. She just has to be less reliant on a support. She needs some downtime so that a support doesn't feel overpowered with her. That's about it. Sim, using teleport immediately starts shield regeneration. We're seeing Sim to get more in use with more buffs for her on the way. She's fitting into a good position. The change here is to give her a little more utility and encourage more teleporter usage on the flanks. So we increased shield regen after 5 seconds. If you use Sim's teleporter, I want it to instantly kick off. Just to build her synergy with other DPSs and tanks. Sombra, I just had to add this in. Sombra EMP no longer affects personal shields. It's already strong enough as it is. Sound Barrier and all other shields will still keep the same interaction. So she doesn't make DPS have 100 health. That's it. Tanks. Most tanks are in suitable positions with the change to headshot damage. 4 of them can headshot while the other 4 cannot. While they all benefit from the reduction in headshot damage, they are affected more by the longer downtime for supports. I don't think much needs to change, as the main concern of shields has been addressed with the longer shield regeneration delay. The only suggestion I have for the tanks are Orisa and Sim. The biggest culprits of double shield meta are not strictly caused by double shields, but by the massive mid-range burst damage they possess. So, Orisa, her issue is with such a large clip and low cooldowns, all you do is cycle through the abilities, and with enough support you can constantly stay alive. Little effort is needed to make her extremely effective. This is both boring to play as and boring to play against, as there's little value to learning her timings. The idea I propose is to heavily punish her for using all of her abilities, but allow them to be all of them to be more flexible. Shield can be used more often, but removes the double shield on cooldown. Fortify can be used for the same amount of time, but for a much longer cooldown. The benefit to this is that she can now use it as single charge to deal with a single ability instead of baiting it all out at once. For Halt, we gradually reduce the AoE, but allow players more time to react, so Halt becomes more area denial instead of constant chaining abilities. Her primary attack will now miss more at mid-range with its wider spread, but still effective up close. She gains slight increase to her movement, make her feel more fluid, as well as interruptible reload, giving her more time and giving her more flexibility to a given situation. So the changes are primary attack pattern, instead of all going to the center, I'll do it to the camera, instead of all going there, now it's 3 dots, like the Predator attack. So she'll constantly hit, in a triangle type pattern. This makes her less accurate at range, still keeps her damage up close. Ammo count, she loses 50, but now her reload slowly fills up. So she can stop reloading at any point in time, and she has ammo. So she doesn't have to... Right now she has a 2.5 second delay for a fully reload. I want her to be able to interrupt her reload at any point in time, kind of like Ashe. But think of just a battery power gauge going up. And no matter what, there's a little delay after reload. Move speed, she's a little bit faster when she's moving. Fortify now has 4 charges of 1 second effectiveness. They take 6 seconds to recharge, damage reduction back up to 50%. And the idea here, I said it, she can use it like, oh, Sigma ulted. Oh, I can only use 1 charge then. Great. She can use it to, like, when everyone tries to hit her with stun, she can, bam, use it right away. It's more flexible, but yes, it's 24 second total. Right now it's 10 seconds. So it's massive, and I want it to be that way. I think Fortify, you have to do something to it. But she has 4 charges because she has 4 seconds of Fortify current. So her total time doesn't change, but the amount of time she has to wait between using all 4 instances of it go up a lot. So making her a lot more tanky? No, I think this isn't making her more tanky at all. This change just hit recently from 50 to 40%. Barrier cooldown changed from 6 seconds or 10 seconds to 6 seconds after it's destroyed. Looking at her shield and pressing the button again will self-destroy the shield. So think of Torb Turret. So no longer can Orisa throw a shield in the air. You do 600 points of damage to that, she throws another one down instantly, do another 600. She gets it a little bit faster, but once you break it, there will be 6 seconds of downtime no matter what. Halt, radius reduced from 7 to 5, the slow is removed, activation delay from 0.45 to 0.8. I want it to deny area and not just be like a thing that you constantly fucking use to chain with abilities. You think about making her receive the same effective healing while in Fortify? No. I think this is fine. If you make her burn charges and she has to wait 24 seconds for them again, I think that's fine. Sigma. At first I wanted to reduce Sigma's range, but I noticed a lot of players love the aspect of his bouncing shot. Got me thinking on why Sigma's ability has AoE damage at all. Besides general usefulness, it comes down to player feedback. If Sigma's attacks didn't detonate, they would feel like garbage on it, even on a direct hit. Instead, the players get a nice sound and damage. You can really feel a good Sigma shot. The problem is that it allows Sigma players to be rather inaccurate and still provide significant damage. Instead of removing the AoE damage and removing the mental impact it creates, it reduces AoE damage to punish missed shots and make them feel less impressive. The issue of his shield being constantly up was addressed with the shield regen change. Once broken, he now has to wait 5 seconds to get his shield back. This will allow more sustained damage against Sigma. How did I come up with all these numbers? This one? Like, what numbers? I mean, I balance it around, like, the abilities and what else tanks can do. So yeah, Sigma's pretty simple with the shield nerf overall. A lot of his constant taking it out and putting it back out, shield gain is kind of removed or inhibited. And then he just gets a nerf to his AoE damage. In Graviton Flux, it shouldn't do 50 damage. I don't like it. That's all there is to it. If we Roadhog, if we promote mobility, then we also need to help each role deal with it. So let's bring Hog back. When Hog was changed into a brawler, he lost a significant part of his identity, burst damage. Hog holds space purely with the threat of death. The problem is that it's based on a single ability instead of his primary, which is more readily available. Essentially, if you're afraid of him every 6 seconds, then once the cooldown's up, he's done. I want him to constantly be fearful. Or you have to be constantly fearful of. The idea is to reintroduce that fear again, but at a higher ammo cost than before. Overall, it's a nerf to his damage output, as he'll have to reload more, but he retains harassment and shield damage with the secondary attack. I understand it looks elegant that his primary and secondary are the same, but I think we should use them as different attacks to give him more options. His new passive is to leverage the concept that the only tanking he does is with his physical body. While it's always been suggested that he body blocked, there was no ability to directly suggest that. With this, he now provides some tanking in a way that's quite different from the other tanks, but still within his design. Heroes such as Ryan, Doom, and Brig will no longer be able to charge him, as he will block it physically. We also add the idea that any hero under a dash effect, such as Hammond, Genji, or Tracer, will also be knocked down if they try to pass through his model with an ability. So, his primary fire goes up to 200 damage. This was OG Hog. OG Hog was 200 damage, 1 second delay between them. But now we're upping his ammo from 1 to 2. So Old Hog was 5 shots, 200 damage, 1 second between shots. What I'm suggesting is he has 6 ammo, damage is 200, attack speed is 1 second, but he only gets 3 shots per clip. So he has significantly reduced DPS compared to his Hog 1.0, but he retains a lot of burst damage, so you're terrified. But his secondary fire is what it is now. So it's 150 damage and 0.7 seconds. As his passive, heroes that charge into Hog are now knocked down. Heroes are no longer able to pass through Hog with abilities. The passive sounds like it'd be difficult to put into the engine. I mean, I know, but I still that's what I'd like for Hog. Just because it makes him a tank in a weird way, but it still's Hog still does his thing. I assume Hog is also knocked down, but with the charges, yes, but for Tracer, Genji, Hammond, no. You're not a big fan of the alt as the passive, as it's too much value for not activating anything. Reinhardt gets his steadfast, right? He doesn't get knocked around as much, and that's always going. I just think Hog is in such a bad spot right now that he needs a lot. Knockdown seems too strong. I'm fine with these mobile heroes getting killed if they fuck up their mobility. That's kind of it. And then it's kind of like my closing thoughts. DPS, tank, and support heroes are designed different. The way they receive feedback through the game mechanics is also completely different, so each role needs to be addressed differently. DPS heroes feel rewarded for the constant pressure they create and the shots they hit. Player skill has gotten to the point where too much damage is coming from these heroes at a constant rate, so we lowered the degree of damage while allowing them to still have their tools to do their job. Supports feel rewarded to save an ally with burst healing or big ability usage. Because all heals can deal damage, but only a couple can prevent it, supports will always require burst healing. We keep their burst healing, but create windows of opportunity where they are unable to heal, while keeping impactful abilities that immediately save someone's life. Basically, we want players to always feel like they have the ability to do something massive, but we just kind of limit it a little bit. For supports, we limit the windows. For DPS, we're limiting the range or the consistency of it. Because that's the game with DPS, is consistency. The game with support should be like, when do I use it? How do I use it? Tanks feel rewarded when they can provide the opportunity to their teammates from creating space through damage or damage mitigation. They also get tremendous feedback when they bide their time and can attack when viable. By switching between threatening damage and damage mitigation, they have a fluid way to play an otherwise boring role. I think tanks are boring, and this is maybe my personal opinion. I think tanks are boring as shit to play in every other game. You just sit there and get hit, you cycle through abilities, that's it. We take none of this away from tanks so that we can instead target the window of team-wide damage mitigation, allowing all heroes to feel more rewarded for damaging shields and opening up more angles and ways to play Overwatch. Boop. Anyone that stuck around this long, thank you. It's a lot. I kind of summed up what I thought at the start, and I kind of reiterated at the end. That's writing.